Welcome back to part 2. This chapter is called Rescued. One June morning, while gathering shellfish on the shore and gazing at the endless sea, Manjiro was fascinated by a black dot on the watery horizon. The dot grew bigger and bigger as it came near. It was a ship, a huge one, larger than any ship Manjiro had ever seen. He raced back to the cave to get the others. The crippled Jasuke waited impatiently with his brother Denzo and his other brother Gomen, and their friend Teruman rushed to the shore for the incredible sight. Teruman picked up the plank that waves had thrown on the shore, tied a piece of his own tattered clothing to it, and waved it frantically, hoping to attract the attention of someone on the oncoming ship. The giant vessel folded its sails, approached their island, dropped anchor, and then lowered 2 bulky boats into the water. The boats, each carrying 6 men, headed toward shore, but not toward the castaways. The strangers were heading for another part of the island. The marooned men panicked because they weren't noticed. Little did they know that these boats had been launched with orders to search for turtles. Turtles were ideal for a ship's larder because they could be stored alive for months without being fed, and their meat was delicious. Luckily, just as they went about to roll around a bend, the turtle hunters sighted Manjiro and his group. They shouted something in a language that the castaways could not understand. Then one of the boatmen motioned to them using gestures of pantomime. Manjiro guessed that they were being told to swim to these men. He waded into the water, dove under a high wave, and with steady strokes swam to one of the boats. Gaiman and Teruman followed him. Strong arms pulled them on board. When they looked at their rescuers, the castaways became fearful. The foreigners' features were completely different from any they had ever seen before. They never dreamed that men with such long noses, hairy faces, and light hair inhabited Earth. And oh, their weird clothing. Leathered boots instead of straw sandals, narrow-sleeved shirts and body-clinging pants instead of kimonos. However, even though the foreigners looked strange, there was no choice but to trust them, especially because these barbarians acted with kindness and concern. Using the common language of gesture, Manjiro pointed to the island and indicated that others were stranded there because rocks and reefs made docking in the island dangerous. 2 of the boatmen swam to shore with Manjiro. When they entered the cave, Jasuke and Denzo were so frightened they shrank back in terror. Manjiro calmed them down and explained that these odd-looking aliens came from a ship that would sail them away from their island prison. Denzo carried his crippled brother to shore, then, clutching him, swam with the others to the other boats. The captain of the ship made this entry in his logbook, Sunday, June 27th, 1841. Sent 2 boats to see if there were any turtles. Found 5 poor, distressed people on the isle, took them off, could not understand anything from them more than they were hungry. After boarding the boat, the 5 castaways were rowed to the most enormous ship they'd ever seen in their lives. It was 180 feet from bow to stern, 36 feet wide, with 3 masts 100 feet high, flying white sails. It was so big that in addition to the 2 boats used by the turtle hunters, there were 4 more boats lashed to its sides. The group had been rescued by the seamen of an American whaler, the John Howland. The ship had set out from the port of New Bedford, Massachusetts, and had been at sea hunting whales for 20 months. The crew of 34 men were under the command of Captain William H. Whitfield. Only 36 years old, he was nevertheless a seasoned old salt who had been chasing ocean prey for more than 20 years. Whitfield was highly respected, especially because, unlike other captains of the time, he did not believe in flogging. Instead, anyone who disobeyed orders was punished by having privileges taken away or by having money deducted from his share of the profits. The captain ordered his men to provide clothing so that the castaways could change from their wet rags. For the first time in their lives, the rescued 5 wore shorts and pants with buttons and pockets. Buttons were unknown in Japan. where cord, strings, and sashes were used to fasten loose-fitting clothing. Pockets were also new to them. People at home carried small packages in their sleeves, tucked in sashes, or placed in the bosom of a kimono. The group was also surprised to see leather boots. In Japan, using leather or any other animal products was against the law. Before bedding down on the floor below deck, they were served a supper. In addition to soup, they ate bread, a food they had never eaten before. At first, they were given their meals and confined below so that they would not interfere with the work of sailing and whaling. Although unable to understand the sailors' language, they easily interpreted their friends' attitudes and were very happy when, after some days, the captain allowed them to explore the ship. They were amazed to find a food supply of live chickens and pigs, spare provisions, sails, ropes, harpoons, and hundreds of casks containing whale oil were also stored below. The oil represented the captain's and crew's earnings from whale hunts. Instead of wages, each hand received a percentage of the profits, known as a lei. The size of the lei depended on the importance of the man's job. Ordinary men could be rewarded with as little as 275% of the portage of the voyage. Skilled workers received more. The captain, the ship owners, and the people in the United States who had financed the voyage made the most money in the whale hunt. Successful, everybody got paid. If it was not, nobody made a penny. Herman Melville, the great American author, worked on a whaler in the Pacific Ocean in 1841. They were the same year Manjiro and his group were on the John Howland. In Moby Dick, Melville detailed what life was like of a typical whaler at that time, reporting that of the grand order of folio leviathans, the sperm whale and the right whale are by far the most noteworthy. They are the only whales regularly hunted by men. Manjiro knew that the whales were caught in Japan by coastal villagers far from his home. Their hunting methods were very different from those on the John Howland. They worked from land with sentinels sighting their prey from hills overlooking the ocean. When a whale slammed close to the shore, hundreds of people went into action. At least 30 longboats, each rowed by 30 to 40 men, held enormous nets that were dropped overboard to encircle and trap a whale. After being blocked by the nets, the whale was killed by harpooners. Then some men climbed onto the beast's back, and others swam underneath to attach ropes from the monster to the boats that dragged it to shore. On the beach, the beast was butchered, packaged, and sold as food. Blubber, bones, and oil were often discarded. A killed whale was butchered for its value as food. The best cuts were set aside for the tables of nobility. Until a whale was caught, Manjiro and his friends could not understand why there were two enormous brick ovens dominating the top deck. These were try-ovens for cooking chunks of blubber, or whale fat, which, when boiled, turned into oil. The carcass of one whale could hold tons of valuable oil. In those days, before oil wells were drilled, whale oil was used to light lamps, lubricate machinery, and make items such as soaps, perfumes, candles, and medicine. The Japanese did not know about the many uses of oil at the time. Sperm whales' jaws, which could measure 20 feet in length, were hoisted on deck. The teeth were dug out with sharp spades, then stored to be sold later as precious ivory. Melville reported that the sea beast's bones were sawn into slabs and piled away like joists for building houses. These were made into gateposts, rafters, and fences, and were also fashioned into furniture. The heads of right whales were often hoisted on board too. When pried open, the insides of the jaws could measure 20 feet long, 5 feet high, and 12 feet wide. A cavity roomy enough for several men to enter. A right whale's toothless mouth was filled with unique treasures. Melville wrote that the lower lip would yield up to some 500 gallons of oil and more. The hundreds of boards of baleen that curtained the whale's upper jaws to strain its food were used for making items such as buggy whips, carriage springs, canes, fishing rods, umbrella ribs, rakes, and stiffeners for women's corsets and hoops for their skirts. Whaling was a mammoth, highly profitable business for 19th century New Englanders. Between hunts, the crew kept busy swabbing decks, constructing casts, repairing ropes, fixing sails, and keeping things ship-shape. They were also a lookout perched 100 feet above deck at the top of the main mast, spyglass in hand, watching for whales. Manjiro amazed everyone from captain to cabin boy because after a few weeks he learned to speak and understand English. He asked for the chance to climb the ropes to the top of the mainmast and stand watch as lookout. His very first time at this job, Manjiro spied a spout, the fountain of vapor made by the breath of the whale surfacing for air. He shouted the traditional, "There she blows! Blows!" a call that brought quick action. 4 boats were lowered, each with 1 harpooner, 1 skipper, and 4 rowers. They surrounded the ocean giant. They gave chase as the prey sounded by diving deep underwater. It could be an hour and a half before the whale came up to get its needed breath of air. Then the boats closed in. Harpooners hurled their weapons until the sea around them streaked red with blood. Secured with ropes, a wounded whale often pulled the boat for many miles before it collapsed and tired. Ropes on the boats were used to drag and fasten the dead whale to the ship's starboard side. One man stood on top of the whale to attach a chain with a huge hook to its back. Then the carcass was cut into slabs by men who worked from the main deck with 20-foot-long razor-sharp blades. Using block and tackle, the blubber was lifted on board, where it was cut up into smaller chunks and boiled in huge tripods. The entire process fascinated Manjiro and his group, who had never caught anything larger than a sea bass. They admired experienced whale hunters who risked their lives fighting sea monsters. Not only was the boat's crew in danger when a whale was harpooned, but the John Holland was also in peril. Ships had been wrecked by infuriated whales. There was hardly a harpooner who hadn't heard about the awful fate of the Nantucket ship, the Essex. In 1819, it sank to the bottom of the Pacific after a headstrong whale rammed a huge hole in the ship's side with its head. Luckily, the crew had enough time to escape in their whaleboats. Manjiro was particularly interested in learning the skills needed to navigate a big ship. Captain Whitfield was so enchanted by the boy's brilliance and passion for learning that he taught him to read maps and lectured him on the art of piloting. At times, he handed over the helm to allow Manjiro the thrill of steering the ship. This was exciting for Manjiro and diverting because his heart ached. Leisure time was agony because he worried about his family, and he despaired that he would never see them again. Captain Whitfield gave the boy a name, easier for Americans to pronounce than Manjiro. Everyone called him John Mung.